Okay, coming off the heels of the 80s metal band tier list, here we go with the 90s metal band tier list. And I'm going to make this pretty short and sweet. We're going to get right to the chase after a little bit of housekeeping. Okay, so first of all, after I released the 80s metal tier list, it became very apparent to me that, number one, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Okay, I did know that. I thought I made that disclaimer pretty clear. Like, hey, I'm just a casual. And hey, I acknowledge the AC/DC's not metal and they shouldn't be in a metal category, but this is what Google spit out at me. But then there's many of you that are reminding me of the fact, something that I stated that was very, very fucking obvious. And it just became clear to me that, you know, people, they don't watch the video. They just scroll around to see where I put different bands and they don't get the fucking context of things. So here we go. I'm putting it out there in the first fucking minute of the video. I'm a layman. I'm a casual. I'm a jack of all trades. Somebody who has a lot of interest but is an expert in fucking nothing. And the way that I do this is I type in, hey, 80s metal bands, Google, spit it out at me. I take the first 20, I throw it in the fucking tier list, and I rank them as best I can. That's how this works, and that's how it's going to work again here today. Although, I'll say another bit of criticism that I got that I do take a little bit seriously is, hey man, these things go for over an hour. That's like the length of a fucking movie. You think you can make this a little quicker so we can kind of digest it a little more easily? And so fine, fair enough. That's in fact something that I've thought about. Like, why am I doing 20 bands at a time? 20 wrestlers at a time, 20 dinosaurs at a time, 20 NFL teams at a time. It takes fucking forever because I like to yak. I got a lot to say, a lot of nothing to say. Which might be a fucking clue into a band we'll get to later down the list. Anyway, so today we're going to try something a little bit new. We're going to do 10, okay? I'm going to do 10 90s metal bands, and then I'll come back to the genre. I mean, I'm going to come back to all these. I'm not done with the wrestling gimmicks. I'm not done with the 80s metal bands. I'm not done with, well, I haven't even started on the 90s metal bands, but you get my drift, okay? There's no reason for me to fucking dump 20 at a time when 10 would suffice, I think. But let's see how this goes. So, and one last thing before we go ahead and get started is, okay, so what's the criteria, right? Like last time I fucked up, right? Okay, well, I'll take most of the blame. It's ultimately my discretion. But I will blame Google. Google calls AC/DC a fucking metal band. I'm putting them in there. Even though I know goddamn well they're not a metal band. But whatever. Why not talk about AC/DC? Is there something wrong with talking about AC/DC? Were they not on Butthead's fucking t-shirt? Okay? Anyway. I'll try to be a little more accurate this time. But okay, so for the criteria. 90s metal. Okay, we know what metal means, I guess. Because, you know, again, it was very clear to me. Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, they don't belong on this list, but they wound up there anyway. Whatever, we can talk about that. We'll talk about the genre. We're going to get into that a little bit more because there's some fucking muddy waters, man. There's some blurred lines when we talk about genres. What is metal? What is grunge? What is punk? What is rock? You know, so we'll kind of get into that as we move along. But also, what does it mean to be a 90s band? Right? Does that mean that you're relegated to that decade? I mean, we talked, for example, about Metallica last time around. I considered them an 80s metal band because that's when they were fucking metal. Again, you know, fucking, I said it last time. Kill 'Em All, 83. Ride of Lightning, 84. Master of Puppets, 86. Fucking Justice for All, 88, 89, whatever the fuck. Right? And then, the fucking Black Album, 90, 91. And then after the fucking 90s were over, that's when the fucking metal was over, for the most part. I mean, yeah, they've kind of rekindled a little bit of that flame since then, over the years, but it's been sparse. But obviously they've achieved most of their mainstream success post-90s. So are they really an 80s metal band in the same way, say, that Dokken is an 80s metal band? No. But that's because Dokken didn't have a fucking career after the 90s, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so it could mean a couple different things. So there's going to be some muddy waters there, too. So I'll try to address it as we go, but for the sake of not blathering on forever before we really get started in the tier list, let's go here. Starting things off, we've got the Deftones. I want to say when did they debut? When did Adrenaline come out? 95? 94? I can't recall. It's one of those 2 years. I want to say that Adrenaline came out shortly after Korn's debut record came out. And so we're talking the mid-90s when that band really first hit the scene and you know, made themselves like a fucking staple of the nu metal subgenre, which, you know, I would argue they broke out of shortly thereafter. But nevertheless, I'm talking about nu metal. I really think Deftones was one of the pioneers of that subgenre. And not that this is a nu metal tier list, but I mean, what does that subgenre mean? You know, down-tuned guitars. You know, we you know, guitar solos went by the wayside. Things were a lot slower, more emotive. Much less emphasis on, you know, technical ability. And again, greater emphasis on raw emotion. I think, you know, just like Korn, Deftones fit that bill, at least with their first few. And then, of course, they kind of morphed into what some journalists and fucking critics have considered like the Radiohead of the metal world, which, well, take or leave that. I don't know. I guess I could see that. Okay, but when you starting with Adrenaline, you move on to Around the Fur, which to me, that was the album that got my attention. You know, Shove It, fucking Around the Fur. Yeah, lots of great tunes on that record. And then, of course, they followed that up with White Pony. They're probably most critically acclaimed, or that was their first real step into the mainstream. So for me, I mean, even though White Pony, I believe, came out in 2000, so I mean, they only had a couple records released in the 90s, but that's where they fucking staked their claim, was in the mid-90s. And they, again, were one of those bands pioneering that new sound. So, of course, I feel like they absolutely should qualify as a 90s metal band. The question is, where, in terms of this tier list, do they fit? You know? How influential were they? How synonymous with the 90s are they? How synonymous with metal are they? You know, I think they're quite influential. And I really feel like they are, you know, again, that sound that they helped cultivate, it was conceived in the 90s. So how can you deny the Deftones? And I will say, to me, they've throughout their career, and where a lot of these, quote, nu metal bands, your Limp Bizkits, your, not even Limp Bizkit. I mean, there's so many that you could fucking write on a list that their names are escaping me because they're not worth remembering, because so much of that, just like the fucking decade before with the 80s metal bands, right? Like, so for every Iron Maiden, there was like, you know, 150 copycats that aren't worth remembering, okay? For every Dokken, there was 150 copycats that aren't worth remembering. And so it was the same thing in the 90s with the nu metal guys. For every Korn, for every Deftones, there was fucking Slaves on Dope. Okay? Moto Grader. That's just not worth remembering. Now, I'm struggling, though. Because I want to try to be a little more accurate with this tier list here, okay? I don't want to, just because I like the Deftones and I think they've had a great career, does that mean that I really think they belong in Apex? You know, when we try to mash all these things together, again, you know, how associated with the 90s are they? How associated with metal are they? I would say, you know, B+ on both counts, right? Which I don't think that puts them into Apex. Even though they've had a great career, they're a highly respected band and they deserve, you know, whatever praise they get. I don't know. I mean, how much did they really innovate? Well, I don't know. Fucking, I guess they did. You know, with the right alongside Korn again. I mean, it was one of the, a lot of times too, it's the singer, right? Like where, you know, prior to the Deftones, okay, I mean, you look back to the 80s and like think of the singing style. okay, of the 80s. A lot of everybody's trying to be a Rob Halford ripoff, right? Hitting those fucking falsetto vocals or a fucking Bruce Dickinson ripoff. I mean, make no mistake, the 80s bands were highly, highly talented. And then when you got to the 90s, I mean, again, the guitar solos, they're gone. A lot of that technical shit's gone. The singers, too, though. I mean, Chino, I'm not saying he's not a talented vocalist. It's just, you know, like the fucking whining to screaming to whatever the fuck. And it was all, you know, I guess arguably creative. It was a new thing. Him and Jonathan Davis were both doing it. So I don't know what the fuck I'm talking. I mean, you know what? Deftones, badass. They're going into the badass tier. I mean, they're a fucking great band, highly influential. They've had a great career even beyond the 90s, but to me, when I think of 90s metal, like Deftones aren't at the top of the mountain, but they're close. Okay, so next on the list, White Zombie. Now, so like I just said, 90s metal, fucking White Zombie. I mean, shit. When did fucking Les Exorcisto or whatever the fuck that album was with Thunder Kiss 65 on it? When did that come out? 1990, 1991? Somewhere around there? I don't know. Was it 91, 92? Early 90s, okay, is when they fucking debuted, with the Thunder Kiss and all that. And then, of course, Astro Creep 2000, 94 or something like that. Maybe 95, I can't quite recall. But fuck, White Zombie's entire career really was just relegated to the 90s. And when you think back to that era, right, that early to mid 90s era, the way, what did MTV look like at that time? If it wasn't hip hop and fucking pop or whatever, like the rock and roll and the metal, they had Liquid Television at the time. Okay, that's where Beavis and Butthead came from. Crazy fucking avant-garde type artwork. It was a very unique period in time that White Zombie existed. And so for me, when I think of the 90s, when I think of 90s metal, I mean, the White Zombie is one of those bands that comes to mind first. And don't get it mixed up, okay? So this is not, there's a difference. I'm making a distinction between White Zombie and Rob Zombie himself, okay? Hellbilly Deluxe, Dragula, all that shit that came later. It ain't the same thing, okay? It might be the same singer, but it ain't the same thing. It's like saying Ozzy Osbourne is Black Sabbath. No, he's fucking not. Okay, Ozzy's Ozzy. He's great and deserves all the respect in the world, but he's not Black Sabbath. And Rob Zombie is not White Zombie. You don't have White Zombie without John Tempest and Sean Assault and so on and so forth. White Zombie was very much their own thing, and they're a fucking great band. Rob Zombie, another one. I think there was, the thing about the 90s is it was a time where people were just trying to kind of throw shit against the wall to see what sticks, right? People were the hair metal bands had kind of worn out their welcome, and now we were trying to see what's next. Where are we going from here, okay? Because we can't just keep fucking riding this fucking, makeup wearing, teased hair coat, fucking snorting trend. Somewhere things have got to shift from this, everybody looks like a bitch and sings like a bitch and plays blazing guitar solos. We got to go somewhere darker. We got to go somewhere different, okay? Maybe not necessarily darker. We got to get a little weird with it. So 90s to me were a time, especially the early 90s, were a time of experimentation, and White Zombie is a good example of that. And of course, you've got other bands like Primus and stuff that we'll get to later down the road. The Butthole Surfers, Green Jello, so on and so forth, right? It was a very unique time. And of course, this is when the term alternative rock started creeping into the fucking conversation. And what does that mean? Alternative. Alternative to what? Well, the fucking 80s rock, the 80s hair metal. And so that's where, again, and we'll get into it when we get to some of these bands, but where I just I never cared for that term, alternative. All right, fucking Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, grunge, alternative, What's what? I don't fucking know, because supposedly REM is alternative, Counting Crows is alternative, and you're telling me fucking Alice in Chains is alternative, and it ain't the same fucking thing, it ain't belong on the same fucking list. So alternative's too much of a fucking blanket term. But there was definitely something going on, and White Zombie was a part of that. Alternative metal, I guess. Whatever the fuck. They were just another step in a particular direction, I guess, that would become new metal. Right? Although they were different, I don't know, fucking new metal I think is so fucking associated with like rap rock, right? DJs and fucking, White Zombie still had some guitar solos. They weren't fucking completely musically inept. Granted, Rob Zombie wasn't exactly fucking blowing people's minds with his fucking brilliant vocals like, but then you listen to bands like Cold Chamber and shit that would come later and it sounds fucking exactly like that. So, I don't know, man. I think fucking White Zombie, to me, that's 90s metal. That's apex, man. White Zombie is 90s metal apex. And I guess part of what might not be fair, because of course they didn't have the career that the Deftones did, and it's because they were relegated to the 90s, okay? Rob Zombie broke off on his own before the new millennium. But that's okay. White Zombie fits firmly within the 90s, firmly within metal, and is a great representative of the transitional period that was the early 90s. Okay, another band that might fit that mold, Typo Negative, who is next on the list, although very, very different. Okay, goth metal. If that's a fucking genre, I don't know. I can't, honestly, I love Typo. Okay, but I never really followed whatever the fuck they influenced, whatever came after them. I didn't follow that path. What, I don't know, fucking Moonspell, Nightwish, I don't fucking know. I wasn't into the copycats or the people that would later be influenced by Typo Negative, but I will say that Typo Negative, the band themselves, definitely fucking did a lot for me. And I think today, they've been gone for a long time. Obviously, God rest his soul, Pete Steele's been gone for a while now. What a unique voice, right? What a unique sound. And then every time Halloween comes around, you still got people blazing Black number 1. When you go back and listen to Slow, Deep, and Hard, go back and listen to fucking Bloody Kisses, October Rust, fucking whatever, World Coming Down, whatever, Everything Dies. There was nobody that sounded like Typo Negative. There's nobody that sounded like Pete Steele. There's nobody who had a similar guitar tone to Kenny Hickey, as far as I can recall. And when that band came together, they really did have their own thing going. And again, I think that's just another one of these bands, of which there will be many that we will talk about as we move ahead, that were just such a fucking interesting and creative part of this transitional period in the world of metal. Because again, I think I may have mentioned it already, but and I know I mentioned the word alternative. I think that just people didn't know what the fuck to call what was happening at that time. They couldn't find a better word, because there was definitely something happening. Okay? All this experimentation that was going on. People trying, it's like all these bands, they're doing their thing, and they're all kind of collectively trying to get away from the 80s, but they all go into like different directions. So, again, you have the, people cite Nirvana all the time for the band that killed hair metal, but did Nirvana really ever fucking have anything to do with metal at all? Or were they something else? But at the same time, and people talking about, metal's dead, because Motley Crue was dead, and fucking Warrant was dead, and Skid Row was dead, and everybody was sick of all that shit, but now it's grunge. And it's just like, really though? When you talk about, again, bands like White Zombie, Typo Negative, fucking Pantera, and go on down the list, was metal ever really dead? No, it wasn't. It was changing. And nobody really knew what to call it. And I think Typo Negative, again, a fine example of that. And again, the guitar tone, the keyboards, the organs, whatever. And of course, Pete Steele's voice is whatever the fuck he was doing is like some fucking 6'9" Romanian vampire that was from Brooklyn, New York, or whatever. It fucking works, man. The stage presence, and that's another thing, you know. I mean, I don't think I make a big point of it here, or at least I haven't up to now. Image fucking matters. Okay, we talk about music. Oh, it's just about the music. It should be all about the music. Well, really? Is that the only thing that sold you on fucking Typo Negative? Did Pete Steele being a fucking gigantic, fucking long, black-haired, fucking bodybuilding vampire not fucking play into the equation at all? Did Rob Zombie, looking like some fucking cracked out hobo pirate dancing around with a fucking cowboy hat, not fucking play into that? Did Kiss in their makeup, and of course fucking image matters in fucking popular music. It fucking matters a lot, actually. Because if it was just all about the music, then it wouldn't have fucking MTV wouldn't exist. Okay, anyway, Typo Negative. Where am I putting them on the fucking list? Oh, fuck, man. You know, again, another one of those bands like White Zombie, very, very, very synonymous with the 90s. They are definitely metal, but I don't think I can quite put them into the same tier as White Zombie. I don't know that they had quite the impact. They're a little more obscure. I'm not saying they were a worse band, because if I had to pick between the two, I'd say I like Typo Negative better. They're my more preferred, as far as like listening music. You know, I'm gonna choose Typo over White Zombie, but oh fuck, I hate to do it, but I'm gonna put them right in the same fucking league as the Deftones. Okay. I think that's fair, and it's still badass. And I gotta be honest, you know, I think my bias is really gonna show here, because I think this is gonna be top heavy. It's gonna be top heavy. I like 90s. I like metal. I like 90s metal. I'm gonna like most of these bands, so we're not gonna have a whole lot of ass blasts and fucking losers here. All right, so fucking moving on. Fear Factory. Fear Factory. Fuck, man. I mean, I'm gonna sound like a fucking broken record here. Highly influential. Another game changer, right? But they fucking were, man. Fear Factory straddled that line between fucking, traditional metal and death metal and whatever. What does traditional metal even fucking mean at this point in the conversation? I'm even lost. One thing I liked about Fear Factory is, we talk about gimmicks, right? There are bands that have gimmicks. We just mentioned Kiss a little while ago, right? White Zombie. Everybody's got their gimmick. Well, not everybody, but you get what I mean. Fear Factory. I think of a factory. I think of machines. And I can't think of a fucking band that reminded me more of a machine than Fear Factory. From the fucking drums to the fucking guitars, to the vocals, right? Very, very mechanical, very, very precise, tight, great production. Herrera's drums sounded like a fucking, just a machine gun. Dino's guitar, as down-tuned as it was, he wasn't, we were getting away from the blazing solos, but more onto the more percussive riffing. And then, of course, you had Burton. Bordering on those death metal growls, but even when he would do the clean vocals, it was interesting to me, right? Because, up to that point, again, I hate to keep going back to the 80s. When we think about singers up to that point, clean singers, right? Not like James Hetfield barking like, but like actual, like Halford, high-level singers, right? There's a certain thing that comes to mind. In Burton, he did something different where there was no inflection at all. And that might have been, maybe it was a result of just inability, right? Maybe Burton was just not that good of a singer, but he could hit notes. But he just couldn't make that inflection. There was no emotion, right? Suffer, master. It sounded like that fucking... Fuck. Man, that hurt my voice more than screaming does. Sorry about that. But remember that... going back to the 80s again. Remember that fucking toy? That black wheel with the fucking red, yellow, blue, green. Simon. Doo, 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 doo. That's what fucking Burton reminded me of. Sounded like a fucking computer or a machine. It fit right in with that fucking gimmick is what I'm trying to say. It took me like 10 minutes to fucking say it, but the whole band just sounded like a fucking factory. It fucking worked. And man, back in the 90s, they had some great stuff. Soul of the New Machine. Crash Test is probably my favorite song off that record. Of course, a lot of people know them from, the Gary Newman cover and whatever. It's demanufactured remix. It's all fine, but their earliest works were my favorite. They were more kind of walking that same path as like Napalm Death, where it's like, is this grindcore? Is this death metal? Is this fucking, what is this? Industrial? I don't know. Again, it's just like, a common theme. How many times have I said that now throughout this fucking video? We don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, Fear Factory's the shit, or at least they were. Here's where I'm going to knock them down, though. And I know this, maybe it shouldn't. I'm kind of making up the rules as I go, by the way. They fucking nosedived. Okay? After the 90s, that band fucking shit the bed. Whatever the fuck they were on after they fired Burton or fired Dino or what. I don't know what the fuck happened after like 2002. They did not maintain their former glory into the 2000s. So I guess if I'm going to knock them, it'll be for that. But man, I don't know. And I guess there were other bands like Napalm Death and stuff who we'll get into later that probably had just as big an influence. But Fear Factory, they had their thing. Okay, I'm going to put Fear Factory in the W category. Their career spanned further than just the 90s, but not too much further. And I can't really put them up there with, to me, Deftones or White Zombie, or, the bands that I feel have been more influential. But fucking God bless them. Fear Factory was great in their time. All right, next up, Alice in Chains. All right, here we go. We talked about grunge for a brief second. Is Alice in Chains metal? Because I think I can already hear the fucking comment section pushing back. They're not metal, they're grunge. That's a grunge band like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Soundgarden. Okay. Jeremy, Teen Spirit, Black Hole Sun, man, any of those fucking bands sound the same to you at all? What the fuck is grunge? Nirvana and Alice in Chains aren't even from the same fucking planet. I don't care if they're both from fucking Seattle. They're from two different fucking dimensions in Seattle at a different point in time. They're not the same shit. Grunge is a fake thing, okay? People made it up because, again, they were looking for, people were too, they were lost. Okay, we were lost in the early 90s. We didn't know what to call shit. It's grunge. It's alternative. It's something that's not Motley Crue. Okay, fine. That means they're all the same? Because no, it fucking well, they're all from Seattle, so they must all be... No. Nirvana and Alice in Chains have as fucking much to do with each other as Betty Crocker and Jeffrey Dahmer. Okay? They're not the same fucking thing. Alice in Chains is a fucking metal band. I don't give a fuck what you say. There's guitar solos. It's heavy. Okay? Fucking great. It's Alice in Chains is, if you want to fucking put the alternative label on it, fine. They're alternative metal, but Alice in Chains is every bit as much metal as fucking Deftones and fucking White Zombie, okay? And they're a great goddamn band. Okay, one of the most, talk about, the new metal that would come later. There are very few vocalists that have had more of an impact on that genre, that subgenre, or on any subgenre moving forward than Lane Staley. And that's the only negative thing I could say about the guy. Other than he was a junkie loser that fucking died way too young or whatever. It's sad or whatever. But I always loved his voice. But I just hated how many copycats came after him. There was so many fucking bands. From Days of the New to Creed to fucking Godsmack. Everyone wanted to sound like Lane Staley. And nobody did. It was all fucking pale imitations. But outside of Lane Staley, Jerry Cantrell, let's be honest, was that band. Primary songwriter. He wrote all the riffs. He wrote a lot of the vocals. And he's a great singer in his own right. Alice in Chains was the fucking shit. And of course, their fucking heyday was the 90s. Okay? All their biggest hits, all their greatest material came in the 90s. It's just the only thing that's going to keep them from reaching the top of the mountain is outsiders' perspectives. The people that will say that they're not metal. Okay. I gotta be honest, I disagree. I think Alice in Chains is as much metal as... It's okay, so fucking... Like, what is your criteria for metal? It's gotta have fucking heavy distorted guitars. Okay? Did Alice in Chains have that? Well, it's gotta have blazing guitar solos. Okay, did Alice in Chains not have that? No, I mean, nobody was... He wasn't... Fucking Jerry Cantrell's not Paul Gilbert. He's not Yngwie fucking Malmsteen, but he's fucking something. Right? He's, in my opinion, better than Mick Mars. Okay? So what the fuck is metal? Like, fucking Alice in Chains, I don't know if I'm going to say Apex. I'm not going to say... Man, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I definitely like them better than White Zombie. Like, a lot better. Personally, for me. You know what? Fuck you. Out of spite, because I know how much pushback I'm going to get. Alice in Chains is fucking Apex 90s metal. Fuck off. I don't care. Fight me. All right, next up, Cradle of Filth. See, now this one's a little weird for me. Because Cradle of Filth, I never really... I guess it's because I didn't discover the band until Midian, okay, which I believe came out in about, 2000? Maybe 2001? That's when I first became familiar with that band. It was just like it was like the same thing that happened with me and Metallica all over again. You know, I discovered Metallica in 1990, 1991, whenever the Black Album dropped, right? And then I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Enter Sandman, you know, cool. What's the rest of their shit sound like? They've got all these other albums, and I loved the fucking album art, and I went back and I looked at Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and realized, like, holy fuck, dude, this stuff's even better than whatever this fucking... Made me like the Black Album less. All of a sudden, Enter Sandman wasn't so fucking cool anymore. Okay? But it was because of Enter Sandman, it was because of the play they got on MTV that I became familiar with them. You know, for context, I didn't have older brothers. I had one older cousin, and he was into fucking gangster rap, okay, which I never fucking gave a shit about. So I didn't have anybody ahead of me, you know, and my friends at the time, none of them were that cool. So nobody was fucking telling me that, like, Slayer existed and stuff until, you know, I had to find the shit out for myself post-fucking 80s. And so here we are again. Now we got Cradle of Filth. And, you know, yeah, some of my friends were into metal at the time, but Cradle of Filth is a very acquired taste. Okay, extreme metal on its own right is an acquired taste, but Cradle of Filth, you know, those Banshee style vocals, you love it or you hate it, or you got to get the fuck used to it. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. This is a little bit much, but it didn't take me long to acquire that taste. You know, Her Ghost in the Fog, that resonated with me. I loved the fucking riffing. I was like, I don't know about these vocals, but those fucking guitars sure are ripping. I fucking love those harmonies, like fucking death metal meets Iron Maiden, with some Banshee screaming over the top of it. But very, very quickly, I got used to the Banshee-style vocals. And then when I started looking through their backlog, because again, this is Metallica all over again for me. I discover them in early 2000s, then go back and realize, oh man, these guys were around since the fucking, like, early mid-90s. And their best material is in the fucking early mid-90s, or mid-90s anyway. Fucking Cruelty and the Beast is my favorite record of theirs. But fucking everything past that, everything between Cruelty and Midian is the fucking shit. And even Midian's the shit. I fucking love that album. It wasn't until Damnation in a Day, what is it, fucking Mannequin. It's still alright. And then Amphetamine, and then they really started to kind of, I don't want to say sell out, but they started to change direction, you know. Once fucking Gian left, you know, and then the lineup started to really get fucked around, and they started really fucking sucking the mainstream dick. It was about when I was done with that band. But when it was the 90s, because that's what we're fucking talking about here, fucking Cradle of Filth was the shit. Cruelty brought the orchids. Lust More Wargasm. I mean, these are fucking some of the fucking my favorite metal music of all time is on that one record from that one band. So I'm trying to fight against my bias here because I love fucking old school Cradle of Filth. It's another one where the black metal thing was going on at that time, the death metal thing was going on at that time, thrash metal, goth metal, all these things were happening. What's Cradle of Filth? Alternative. You could fucking say Cradle of Filth is alternative just like you could say fucking Alice in Chains is alternative, really. Because it's not black metal, it's not death metal, it's not thrash metal, it's not goth metal. What the fuck is it? A combination of all these things. I don't like that fucking term alternative because Cradle of Filth fits that fucking thing just as much as Hootie and the goddamn Blowfish. Anyway, the reason that Cradle of Filth can't go into Apex is because, for me, and this is a very personal thing. Hey, commenters, before you start pushing back one way or the other on me, okay? Yes, this is a personal thing because I'm making this tier list and you're not. Okay, you want to make your own. Cradle of Filth can't go into Apex because I don't associate them with the 90s. Maybe other people do, okay? I'm going to put them with Fear Factory, okay? I like Cradle of Filth way more than I don't know. Do I like them more than I like the Deftones? Yeah, I do. I just don't, I don't know, man. I don't associate, for whatever fucking reason, I just don't associate them with the 90s as much. I mean, as badass as those albums were, it's fucking weird because, you know, and they had a lasting influence on things that would come later as well. But I guess the Deftones, if I go back to the 90s and think about, like, what was happening back then and, like, what was the bigger... I hate to get into, like, what was more commercially successful. Because that's fucking stupid. But I'm stupid. So, you know what? I'm leaving it there. If I just ranked every one of these bands how I personally feel, they'd all be in Apex. Okay, I gotta be fair somewhere. I feel like Cradle of Filth really... I guess that's my thing, is they really hit their stride after Midian commercially. They achieved most of their fans after Midian commercially. That's really when they cultivate. You know, and I guess you could say the same thing for Metallica, and I put them in Apex. Well, I changed my mind this time. Cradle of Filth, they're a win. It's a W. It's not a bad spot to be at all. It's respectable, but that's where they go. All right, moving on. Korn. Fuck, dude. I mean, it's like all the shit that I said about the Deftones, take that and amplify it. Korn's the first new metal band, okay? Korn is the first band that really changed the game, like, permanently. That fusion of, like, hip-hop elements with fucking metal. The vocal delivery from Jonathan Davis. I mean, Chino had a certain thing going, but Jonathan had... It was, I don't know how to describe it. You could say it for a lot of people hate it, and I get that. Like that, I'm so worried about what my dad did when he beat me. Like that shit got old with the copycats, just like I said with Lane Staley. Okay. For every innovator, you're going to have people fucking ruining it later, but that first Korn record is arguably one of the darkest. Look at the fucking album art. And they were so fucking creative. You know, I mean, and granted, they owe a lot of that to, like, Mr. Bungle and Faith No More, Primus even, like some of these bands that came before them that were doing things, but those riffs, Blind, Clown. That first fucking album is a 10 out of 10, and I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Even Life is Peaches. Now that's when, you know, the hip-hop influence started to become even more infused into the... You know, but again, I mean, I feel like Korn is almost single-handedly responsible. Fuck no, I'm talking out my ass, because there's so much that was responsible for the subgenre of nu metal, which, again, you could look at as a positive or a negative. Nu metal could be a punchline to you, or it could be something else. But I don't think there's a bigger band. I mean, it's like that album, Follow the Leader. Korn was the leader. They were the band that everybody else was following. And without blathering on too long, Korn goes into 90s metal apex without question. Incubus! All right. Sorry about that. Oh, fuck. I don't know. Incubus. I remember the first time I heard Incubus was on the radio. I was working at Pizza Hut. I was like 17 years old at the time. Closing up shop, going home for the night. And I turn on, a local rock station and I hear this song and I'm like, hey, wait a second. Is that Faith No More? Did Faith No More? I thought they were done after Album of the Year. They put out some other fucking track that I'm unaware of. But it's not quite Faith No More. It's a little different. It's a little happier. It's a little, I don't know. This is like Bitch Faith No More or something. Oh, it's fucking Incubus. And I forget the name of the track, but it was off the album Science. Which, whatever. At the time, I was kind of like, all right, this is okay. New Skin. That wasn't a bad song. But it's very clear to me they were just trying to be fucking Faith No More. And then when the next album came out, it was like, was it the next one? Whatever that fucking TRL shit was. Whatever tomorrow brings, I'll be there. Fuck! That sucked. And that's, I already knew they weren't Faith No More. I was like, it's very clear that you're not Faith No More because they'd never do that shit. And I don't give a fuck. Easy like Sunday Morning Commodore's cover. Fuck off. That ain't the same fucking thing. It was very clear to me that this dude just, he's like laying on his belly with his elbows, like his chin's propped on the palms of his hands. His knees are up and his fucking toes are wagging around like he's trying to act like a bitch to get pussy. And fucking Mike Patton, you never see him doing that shit. So, keep this thing fucking moving, because I know I cut this down to 10 instead of 20 bands, but we're already approaching the 45-minute mark, and we're not fucking done with this. Incubus is Bitch Faith No More, and fucking Ass Blast. Somebody's got to go there. They got to make up for all these high-tier bands, because we only got 2 left, and guess who the next one is? It's Faith No More. So yeah, they got their start in the 80s, Chuck Mosley, blah, 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 The Real Thing itself. A fucking great album. That was my introduction to the band. Came out in 1989. But, it really hit the fucking mainstream and rode that wave into 1990. I remember the VMAs on MTV of that year. Mike Patton, Faith No More, they were up there singing Epic. Okay? So, let's not bullshit. We care a lot. Oh, that's all well and good. Introduce yourself. All well and good. It wasn't until Mike Patton joined that band that they became who they really are. The Game Changers, right? And I don't think that there's a bigger game changer in the fucking entire industry than Faith No More. At least in terms of 90s. I mean, of course, you got bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath before them. Bands like Judas Priest. Fine. The entire landscape shifted after Angel Dust. So I know I went on and on and on about Korn and White Zombie and these bands and stuff, but I feel like Angel Dust, which came out, 1991? Was it 91 or 92? I don't know. White Zombie's debut might have came out before that, but let's not fuck around here, okay? Even, whatever the fuck White Zombie was doing at that time, whatever Alice in Chains was doing at that time, it don't fuck with Angel Dust. It just doesn't, in terms of being innovative, being ahead of its time, being some shit. To get into an anecdote real quickly, I'm a huge... Faith No More is my favorite band of all time, period. Any genre, I don't care. They're my favorite, okay? Now, I got The Real Thing for Christmas of 1989. Or it might have been 1990. I don't remember. Whenever I first saw that fucking video for Epic and then Falling to Pieces after that, and I fell in love with that band as a 9-year-old kid. Had to have it. Put it on my Christmas list. My grandma, God bless her, God rest her soul, she bought it for me on cassette. I wore that motherfucker out. Later, fast forward about 4 or 5 years, I'm like 15 years old, or fucking younger than that, because Angel Dust wasn't that old. So I must have been like 12 or 13 years old, hanging out with a buddy who had bought the Angel Dust CD, thinking it was going to be somewhere on par with what he was familiar with. Like, if you want to feel it, see it today. If you can't, then he's thinking that's what he's like ready for, and it's not that at all. It's fucking Jizzlobber, and it's fucking RV, and it's Crack Hitler, and it's all these songs that were so different from the next, and they were all off the fucking wall, and he just didn't know what to make of it, and he's like, this album fucking sucks. I'll trade you my Angel Dust disc for your fucking Real Thing cassette, because he had lost his fucking Real Thing disc, or whatever the fuck, or his brother, it was his, and he moved. I made the trade, long story short. Sucks for him, though, because I had already worn that fucking cassette the fuck out. And then I took Angel Dust home that night, laid down, put my Discman on, put my headphones on, and I'll never forget, I don't want to be dramatic here, but it changed everything. I remember listening to it, and it took me a minute. Like I said, Danny Filth's vocals, how they're hard, you got to acquire a taste for it. That was the same thing with that band's whole sound. I had to digest it and think about it, and dude, I don't know how I feel about it. Let me listen to it again. And now you go back and listen to songs like Caffeine. Tell me it ain't fucking 20 fucking years ahead of its time. Most of these fucking bands, I just shit on Incubus, but most of these bands that came after Faith No More would not exist if not for Faith No More. Or at the very least, Mr. Bungle. Which is another Mike Patton project, but Faith No More is more than the sum of its parts. It's more than just Mike Patton too. So I'm not trying to make it all about that guy. The real shame is, I loved King for a Day. I loved Album of the Year. I really, Faith No More, again, they've been my favorite band throughout my life since I discovered them. However, I do feel like Angel Dust was their crowning achievement, and when they lost Big Jim, they lost a certain something. And I got to go see Faith No More right before my oldest son was born, back in 2015. I got to see Faith No More at, where the fuck was it? The State Theater in downtown Detroit, Michigan. They were fucking phenomenal. Even back in the because I was 35 years old at the time, and these guys are fucking probably in their late 40s. Still fucking rocked it. Sounded fucking phenomenal. But I wished that Jim was back there with them. I think they did lose something, and I know that there was some heat between him and Mike Patton, or him and the other guys, or whatever. It's unfortunate, because I think they, I know they say Jim Martin didn't have a whole lot to do with the making of Angel Dust, but he was in the studio with them. He did help contribute. He was part of the band. And whatever that dynamic was at that time, it worked to create, to me, which is like one of the greatest albums ever in rock and roll history. Faith No More, look, they're Apex too. Look, fuck, dude, this is a stupid list. This is an ass blast list, because it's all fucking Apex. Because guess what? Next up is Pantera. Okay? And it's the last on the list. And, let's just not beat around the bush. Fucking Pantera. Do I have to talk about that? Really? I don't fucking think I do. How the fuck can Pantera not be Apex in terms of 90s fucking metal? What are you going to tell me? Well, they actually started in the 80s with fucking whatever that fucking... I can't even remember that fucking singer's name. Terry Blaze. When they were fucking all wearing, fucking glitter and fucking sequence bullshit. They were a fucking shit glam metal band, right? Not trying to knock, God bless him. Dimebag Darrell's was like my fucking musical guitar hero. I love that guy. I'm not trying to knock him and his brother, but geez. They were trying to make a career for themselves in the 80s, and they just didn't have that sense of direction. All the talent in the world musically, but just didn't have any of that sense of fucking real direction, I feel. And once Phil Anselmo came into the mix, it was like, here's this dude from New Orleans with a hardcore background. He's rough around the edges, doesn't really fit into that hair metal fucking dynamic. You know, he went and tried to blend in with them, and then it was in a similar way that, like, once Mike Patton joined that fucking band, it changed everything. Well, once Phil Anselmo joined that band, it changed everything. And, man, arguably as big, or maybe bigger, an impact on the world of metal moving forward. You know, Pantera and Faith No More. Jeez, dude. Cowboys from Hell. Vulgar Display of Power. Far Beyond Driven. Great Southern Trendkill. And just like Faith, I mean, these are two bands now. I'm just now realizing it as I'm fucking doing this list. I mean, they have a lot of parallels. Faith No More and Pantera. Now, obviously, one's more highly respected. You know, one doesn't have like a neo-Nazi fucking controversial singer. One, you know, didn't have half their fucking band murdered and shit and isn't trying to fucking piggyback off of fucking, whatever, Zakk Wylde. That new shit that's going on, I gotta say, get out of the way. That's not Pantera. You couldn't pay me to go see Zakk Wylde. And that's not a knock on Zakk Wylde. But I don't want to see Phil, fucking 60-year-old Phil and fucking Rex with, you know, Charlie and Zach. That's not Pantera. Pantera died. Pantera died in like 1995, if I'm being honest. Great Southern Trendkill was the last decent fucking thing they put out. Reinventing the Steel was just kind of meh. You could tell the band was done with each other. You know, Phil was all junked out on heroin, doing whatever the fuck he was doing. And then Dimebag and Vinny, unfortunately, I hate to say it because, you know, quick anecdote. I don't want to make it a whole thing. Dimebag's always been my biggest, like, my favorite guitar player. I think he's the best metal guitar player ever in history. Always thought that. Always wanted to hang out with the dude. Always, you know, grew up watching those fucking, like, backstage home videos, wishing I could be part of that. Long story short, I was. During that Reinventing the Steel tour back in early 2000, I got to go hang out with them. I got to be on their tour bus with them. I got to go drive around, hit up the casinos, fucking go fucking hit the streets, do shots, smoke weed, everything with my fucking guitar hero. It is the fucking greatest night of my life. I can link you to a video where I talk about all that if you want. Not that anybody would care. Just to say how much I love those fucking guys, okay? Just how, especially Dimebag. I cried when he died, okay? However, when you split that group, you saw what Phil did with the Super Joint Ritual, and you can say what you want about that band. But Newfound Power, Damage Plan, was it as corny as like the shit they were doing in their Terry Glaze days? I don't know. I mean, kinda, in a fucking very early 2000s way, yeah. Without Phil in that band, sometimes it takes oil and water mixing to make something volatile enough to call good music. Unfortunately, I feel like that's the case with Pantera. But nevertheless, iconic metal bands of the 90s, iconic metal albums of the 90s. I mean, fuck. Vulgar Display of Power. Is it? I mean, are you fucking shitting me? Which, to me, ain't even their best album. I think Far Beyond Driven is their best album. That's just a personal opinion, but it doesn't get any more 90s in metal at the same time as Pantera. So, guys, I know this is a real apex heavy list. This is stupid. Why did I do this? Why did I pick so many bands I like? Because I had to fight to put Cradle and fucking Fear Factory down in the low, like, the W is low tier for this list. Look at, nobody even made it to Met and L. And really, I put Incubus and Ass Blast as a goof, but realistically, come on, I gotta be fair. They weren't that bad. Pardon Me was a good song. It was catchy. Science was an okay album. It just, fuck whatever came after Science. I don't know, probably not a fair list. This has gone on almost a fucking hour. I tried making it fucking 10 long so we wouldn't have to go an hour, but I fucking wound up going an hour anyway, so guess it's a good thing I cut it down to 10. Anyway, I am glad to be back doing this shit, and I will see you guys in the next video, which I don't know, we'll see what that is. You have to tune in to see. All right, bye.